Hello everyone, my name is Triple S, and in this video I will be talking about the third episode of the first season of Game of Thrones titled Lord Snow. I'll be going through the plot of the episode, giving my thoughts, praise, criticisms and the like throughout. If I get something factually wrong, or if you disagree with any of my thoughts or opinions, just leave a good-natured comment below letting me know. Don't go flying off the handle, please. With that said, let's begin. After the opening credits showing us King's Landing, Winterfell, The Wall and Vaestoflak, the Starks arrive at King's Landing. Ned is met by the King's steward, informing him of a small council meeting called by Grand Maester Pycelle. The steward suggests Ned might want to change, but Ned just stares him down and he leads the way. In the book, it was actually Ned who wanted to change, but as Ned's initial reaction of wanting to put the meeting off till tomorrow due to how knackered he is from riding has been left out, the show instead seems to have made this small change to get across how utterly fed up Ned is at the moment. Heading through the Great Hall, Ned comes across Jaime for a show-exclusive scene. Jaime thankfully isn't sat upon the Iron Throne with the dead king he killed nearby this time, but Ned still looks very unhappy to see him. What ensues is an absolute rollercoaster of a conversation. We start with Jaime either being sincere or mocking Ned in bringing some stern northern leadership to the south. You decide. Ned says he's glad to see Jaime protecting the throne, a sarcastic comment making note of Jaime just sitting on the steps doing nothing. Jaime brings out his Lannister I don't give a fuck attitude, making a joke, then insulting Ned and his new position by mentioning the saying, the king shits and the hand wipes. Ned fires back, pointing out how Jaime's armour is in perfect condition and says he must have chosen his opponents wisely when Jaime says everyone he's ever fought always seems to miss. Jaime switches tact and brings up a painful piece of history for Ned, the death of Ned's father and brother in the very room they're standing in now. He says nobody deserves to die like they did, and whether he is being sincere or is goading Ned into responding again, you decide. Ned does respond, pointing out Jaime did nothing to save them, but Jaime counters at saying the hundreds of people also in the room didn't help either. He says the room was silent except for the screams of Ned's father and brother, which he puts an emphasis on, and also the laughter of the Mad King. He tries to cast himself in a better light for breaking his vows as a Kingsguard and slaying the Mad King by saying it felt like justice for what the King did to Ned's father and brother. Ned is having none of it and throws it back in Jaime's face, asking if it's what he tells himself at night, a response Jaime seems genuinely shocked by. Ned specifically mentions how Jaime stabbed the Mad King in the back, showing Ned values a fair fight, facing your opponent. Jaime points this out, asking if he'd stabbed the Mad King in the belly, would Ned hate him less? Ned doesn't answer, but ends the discussion, calling Jaime a coward for only turning against the Mad King when it was no longer safe for him to remain loyal. The disdain Ned has for Jaime is as clear as day, and Jaime's veiled need for someone to view his kingslaying as a good deed, amazing. Ned meets with several members of the small council, the Master of Whisperers Varys, the Master of Laws, Renly Baratheon, one of King Robert's brothers, the Master of Coin, Peter Baelish, and Grand Maester Pycelle. Master of Ships and Robert's other brother Stannis isn't present, nor is Sir Barristan Selmy, who as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard would have normally had a position on the council, though as he used to be on the Mad King's small council, Robert did not like to include him on his, which Barristan didn't mind. With the Ned meeting Peter Baelish, also known as Littlefinger, for the first time, we learn Peter used to know Ned's dead brother Brandon and that he and Peter had duelled over Cat back when Brandon was the one meant to marry her. Brandon won, leaving Peter with a scar from navel to collarbone. Ned's also visibly unhappy to hear Peter talking about Cat like this. Pycelle hands Ned the brooch, denoting his position as Hand of the King, and the meeting starts without the King. First order of business, the King has ordered a tournament to be held in honour of Ned's new position as Hand, with 40,000 gold dragons going to the champion, and 20,000 each going to the runner-up and the winning archer. Though for some reason, Ned leaves out the 10,000 for the winner of the clubs and sword, 90,000 gold dragons in total, not 80,000. When asked if the Crown can afford all this, Peter reveals he'll have to borrow the money as the Crown is already 6 million gold dragons in debt, mostly to Tywin Lannister, who is owed 3 million. Ned can't believe Jon Arryn would allow Robert to bankrupt the realm, but Pycelle says Robert never really listened to Jon on matters of money. Ned forbids any arranging of the tournament till he talks to Robert, snapping loudly at everyone before apologising. Varys forgives Ned on behalf of everyone, saying he is the Hand, and the council serves at his pleasure, though that reminds me of something a wise man once said, "You served him well when serving was safe." Venturing away from the book again, we cut to Cersei and Joffrey having a chat. Treating the bite Nymeria gave Joffrey, she essentially teaches him that history is written by the victors, that Joffrey should say he killed the direwolf and spared Arya, and when he is king, he can go full 1984 Ministry of Truth. Joffrey asks if he has to marry Sansa, and Cersei says yes, but that if Joffrey doesn't like her, he only has to see her on formal occasions and to make babies, and instead can mess around with whores and virgins. Somewhat hypocritical of Cersei. We saw how she reacted in the first episode watching Robert canoodling with another woman, and now here she is telling her son it's okay to be unfaithful. With all this talk of Sansa, Joffrey reveals his true feelings towards the Northerners, that they are too powerful and think themselves equal to the Southerners. He says there should be a royal army, that every lord should contribute men to it, but Cersei points out a flaw. If the Northerners rebel, who will the Northerners in the royal army fight for? Joffrey says they will fight for him because he is the king, and he's not asking, he's telling. But the point is moot with the fact that the North cannot be held as it is too big, and Joffrey's royal army will be defeated by Winter and the Northerners who are used to living in it, just like Napoleon and Hitler with Russia. Cersei says Joffrey needs to learn when to save his strength and when to destroy his enemies. But all Joffrey hears is that she considers the Starks their enemy, and she agrees everyone who isn't them is an enemy. The fact that Joffrey does not learn from this lesson will become very important later on. Set to Mordane, Arya and Sansa are sat eating, well, set to Mordane and Sansa are eating. Arya's stabbing the table. She says she's practicing for Joffrey and tells Sansa she killed Mycah with her lying about what happened at the Ruby Ford. Arya, you should have gone straight for Sansa's house and brought up Lady. Ned walks in and tells Arya to go to her room before giving Sansa a gift of a doll from Princess Marcella's doll maker. Sansa says she's too old for dolls, and Ned comments, "War was easier than daughters," after Sansa has excused herself. Speaking of war and daughters, Ned heads to Arya's room and finds her with Needle. He asks where she got the sword from, but Arya ain't no snitch. She does say though that she knows something about sword fighting. Jon's first lesson, stick them with the pointy end. She admits that she was trying to learn more and had asked Mycah to practice with her, so she is the reason he's dead. Ned disagrees and Arya shouts her hatred for the Hound, the King, the Queen and Sansa. He tells her not to blame Sansa, that yes she lied and didn't call Joffrey a liar, but only because one day they will be married, and so she must take his side even when he's wrong. Arya can't believe her dad will allow Sansa to marry someone like that. Ned tells Arya that King's Landing is a dangerous place and she and Sansa should look after each other instead of fighting. He unfortunately doesn't say the famous line from the book, "When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies but the pack survives." Both Book Ned and Show Ned do both allow their respective Aryas to keep their needles though. Oh, how different everything would have turned out if they didn't. In Winterfell, our wide-awake Bran gets Old Nan to tell him a scary story, and she proceeds to terrify the boy with her talk of the Long Night, a winter that lasted a generation, when kings and shepherds alike froze to death, and mothers smothered their babies, and the White Walkers murdered their way through Westeros on their dead horses and giant pale spiders. Damn, Old Nan, you scary. I love the way she says, "So is this the sort of story that you like?" partway through. Tickles me for some reason. Also a small change from the book where she claims Bran's favourite stories that are Bran and the Builder, not Sir Duncan at all as she says in the show. The change might have been made to not confuse the audience with the similar names of Bran and Brandon the Builder. Story time is interrupted by the arrival of Robb, who sends Old Nan out, then recalls a story she told him of how the sky is blue because they live inside the eye of a blue-eyed giant named Macumba, with Bran saying maybe they do. Robb asks Bran if he still can't remember anything. Bran shakes his head, then Robb says he can't believe Bran fell, with Bran pointing out he obviously did, and if what Maester Lewin had said about his legs is true, he wishes the fall had actually killed him. Heavy talk from a 10-year-old. Back in King's Landing, Cat and Roderick are riding into the city, not realising they are being followed by a pair of gold cloaks. Cat tells Roderick it's highly doubtful anyone will recognise her, when another pair of gold cloaks ride up to them, saying they've been instructed to escort her. She starts to argue, but they hand her a note and ask her to follow. Cat and Roderick are led into a brothel and find Peter sat with two whores, one of whom has her chesticles out. I love Roderick taking a good look as this bare-breasted beauty walks past him when Peter orders them out. You know he's coming back here when he's off the clock. Cat is very miffed at Peter for making her come into a brothel, but Peter argues it's the perfect place for Cat to hide. She asks how Peter knew she was coming to King's Landing, and Varys enters, claiming his little northern birds told him and that he also knows about the dagger. Cat asks if Varys knows who the dagger belonged to. He says no, but Peter says yes, that it's his. Or was, before he lost it when he made a bad bet on Jaime Lannister and lost it to the imp. This is all a very streamlined version of what happens in the book, with Cat and Roderick instead taking a boat to King's Landing and arriving before the King's party, not after. Cat theorises that Varys learned of her arrival in King's Landing and of the dagger from the captain of the ship, rather than Varys admitting that he has informers in the north, as he does in the show. Never been a fan of the way Michelle Fairley, who plays Cat, delivers the back alley Sally line. Feels very forced and unnatural, I feel. Speaking of the imp, Up at the wall, Tyrion and Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Gia Mormont, father of Jorah Mormont, are watching Jon beat the shit out of other recruits in the yard of Castle Black. He breaks Gren's nose, floors Pip with a single jab to the stomach, tosses a rando, and punches and kicks Rast and a long-haired rando to the ground. All the while, Sir Alistair Thorne insults Jon with the nickname Lord Snow and berates the other recruits for being useless. Tyrion comments on Alice's charming nature, but Mormont says charming doesn't turn thieves and runaways into men of the Night's Watch. He shows Tyrion a note that's arrived for Jon, saying it contains both good and bad news. In King's Landing, Ned receives a note from Winterfell himself, from Pycelle, and Peter suggests he share it with his wife, leading him to the brothel where she is hidden. Initially, Ned believes Peter is mocking Ned and insulting Cat, and chokes him till Cat reveals herself. Ah, the Starks. Quick tempers, slow minds. At Castle Black, when Gren calls out Jon in the armory for breaking his nose and Jon says it's an improvement, Gren, Rast and Pip pin Jon with a knife against his throat. Before it can escalate further, Tyrion walks in, threatening Gren, Rast and Pip with having their heads being mounted on spikes in King's Landing. With that, they leave. Jon complains that only Tyrion had told him the truth of the Night's Watch, that his father knew but let him go anyway. Tyrion reveals Gren's father left him outside of a farmhouse when he was 3, and Pip chose the wall over losing his right hand after he was caught stealing a wheel of cheese for his starving sister. He shames Jon for beating them so badly, that they don't have the training Jon does, that they probably never even held a real sword before. Tyrion told Jon the hard truth about the Night's Watch, and now he's telling him the hard truth about the way he's acting. Before he leaves, he hands Jon the note telling him Bran has woken up. And back at King's Landing, Peter tells Ned and Cat the blade will not be enough proof to accuse Tyrion. He will just claim it was stolen from him, and Bran's wolf silenced the only man who could say otherwise. Cat says to Ned that Peter has promised to help them find the truth and that he won't betray her, as he's like a little brother to her. Get brother zone, Littlefinger. All this jumping around has worn me out, so it's nice to stay in King's Landing, but shift to Cersei and Jaime having a lover's quarrel. Cersei has learned Bran has woken up and is mad at Jaime for having pushed him out of the window. She admits that so far he doesn't remember anything, but fears one day he might and will tell his father, who will tell the king. Jaime says they'll just say Bran's lying or he dreamt it all up, but if it came to it he'd go to war with Cersei's husband. The bars could even make it into a song, The War for Cersei's Bajingo. After getting slapped by his twin, Jaime grabs her and says if Bran talks he'll kill everyone. Bran, Ned, the king, everyone, until only Jaime and Cersei are left. About to leave to head back to Winterfell, Cat wishes she could see Arya and Sansa before she heads off. Ned says it's too dangerous as they don't know who their enemies are, but Cat is positive it is Lannisters, though without any proof, Ned says they can't do anything, but as soon as he has it he will tell the king. He tells Cat to be careful on the road back and to watch her temper, to which she jokes about Ned's temper with him nearly killing Peter yesterday. Ned points out Peter still loves her, but she waves it away saying does he, and passionately kissing Ned. Cat and Roderick then depart, leaving Ned not looking too happy. Just a quick note, I don't know why, but the lighting in this scene just feels so fake to me. Maybe they filmed it day for night, or I guess day for dawn. I don't know, but I just think it doesn't look natural. This next scene really reminds me of the scene in Jaws when Quint, Hooper and Brody are drinking in the cabin of the Orca, swapping stories, but instead of talk of scars and surviving shark attacks, a red-faced Robert and Barristan Selmy are recalling their first kills. Barristan's was a Tyroshi with a lance through the heart, and Robert's was a Tarly boy at the Battle of Summer Hall. He goes on a long speech of how he killed the boy, smashing in his chest, then presumably his head with his warhammer. Demanding more wine, we discover the task of refilling the King's Cup is being done by a Lannister, Lancel Lannister. Robert mocks Lancel's name and then grows angry with him when he says there's no more wine. Robert orders him to get more wine, and as he leaves, we see Jaime standing guard outside who Robert shouts at to get in. Robert complains of being surrounded by Lannisters and mocks Jaime's guard duties, standing outside guarding the king as he eats, drinks, defecates and cheats on Cersei. He asks Jaime who his first kill was. Jaime says it was a member of the Kingswood Brotherhood, a band of outlaws operating during the reign of the Mad King. Barristan recollects that day, saying Jaime was only 16. When Robert asks if the outlaw had any last words, Jaime says he decapitated the man, so no. But what about Aerys Targaryen? Robert asks. Did the Mad King call Jaime a traitor, or beg for his life before he was stabbed in the back? Jaime reveals the Mad King only said one thing, the same thing he'd been saying for hours. Burn them all. Speaking of the Mad King, we cut to his daughter riding with the Khalasar and asking Jorah where the Dothraki get their slaves from. Jorah says the Dothraki don't believe in money, so they don't buy their slaves, and are mostly gifts from cities hoping to appease the Dothraki. He points out though that sometimes it doesn't work, and the cities are sacked anyway. Seeing a slave being whipped, Dany orders the Khalasar stopped until she commands otherwise. Jorah says she's learning to talk like a queen, but she corrects him. She's not a queen, she's a Khaleesi. Going for a walk in the long grass and giving off some major Shakira whenever wherever vibes with her outfit, Dany is found by Viserys. He's taken Dany, ordering the horde to halt, as her also ordering him, and he grabs her by the throat and brandishes his very reflective sword in her face. Suddenly, a whip cracks around Viserys' neck and he is pulled to the ground by Rakaro. Eerie translating for Rakaro asks Dany if Viserys should be killed, and when Dani says no, Rakaro suggests taking an ear instead. Dani first begs them not to hurt her brother, but then remembers she's their Khaleesi and instead orders them to release him. Free from the whip, Viserys orders Jorah to kill Rakaro, but Jorah ignores him and instead escorts Dani back to the Khalasar. Viserys is about to get back on his horse when Rakaro takes it, telling Viserys to walk, leaving Viserys with the most hilarious, dumbfounded expression on his face. In the show, it is later that we see Dani truly shake off the fear she has for her brother, but in the book, it takes place in this scene. After seeing him dragged to the ground, choking and crying, her fear for him disappears, and it is she, not Rakaro, who denies him his horse and makes him walk to teach him a lesson. Up north, Jon takes a lift to the top of the wall and bumps into Benjen, who says he's heading beyond the wall. Jon says he's ready, but Benjen says no, that it doesn't matter that he's better trained or that he has Stark blood, he's still a recruit and he has to earn to be a ranger, not expect to be made one. Yoren and Tyrion are sat drinking and chatting about Yoren eating bear testes and going around the Seven Kingdoms looking for people to join the Night's Watch, voluntarily or not. Benjen walks in as Tyrion says it's more likely for poor boys to find feed at the wall than for high bonds to find glory and takes offence at this. He accuses Tyrion of thinking the Night's Watch is just a bunch of jokers and reminds him that he gets to enjoy his wine and horse without fear of being killed by a wildling because it's the men of the Night's Watch who fight and die protecting the Seven Kingdoms from them. Tyrion says he admires the Night's Watch and what they do, but doesn't believe in all the monsters that supposedly exist beyond the wall and that the wildlings aren't anything special. They just ended up on the wrong side. Benjen agrees about the wildlings, but points out Tyrion's never been north of the wall so he can't possibly know what's out there. Saying farewell to Yoren, Benjen heads out after wishing him a happy visit to King's Landing. Tyrion suggests he and Yoren travel together as being a Lannister, no castle or inn will turn them away as they make their way south. Back with the Dothraki horde, Irri is teaching Dani the Dothraki word Afjahaka, which means pride, when suddenly she cups Dani's boob. A shocked Dani asks why she's being groped, and Irri asks how long it's been since Dani last had her period. Dani realises she's pregnant, with Irri saying it's a blessing from the Great Stallion. Outside of the Khaleesi's tent, Jorah and Rakaro were talking of the disadvantages and advantages of their different weapons and protection. That the Dothraki Arak is a good weapon for someone on horseback, but can't pierce plate armour, whereas a broadsword can. Rakaro points out armour makes you slow, which Jorah agrees with, but it also keeps you alive, though Rakaro says that his father taught him that it's speed that is essential. Turns out Rakaro's father was a great warrior and blood rider to a different Khal, keyword being was, whereas Jorah's father, Jeor Mormont, still is a great warrior, a man of honour, and that Jorah betrayed him, what with the whole running away instead of getting his head lopped off by Ned. Irri appears, saying Dani wants to eat something other than ass, I mean horse, for a change, and Rakaro should first kill rabbits, then ducks, then dogs, the first two being rejected by Rakaro and the last by Jorah. She reveals Dani is pregnant, which noticeably shocks Jorah, who after saying he'll have a goat butchered for Dani, announces he must ride to Cahor. In the Castle Black courtyard, Jon has taken Tyrion's words to heart and is going easy training with Gren, even giving him and an observing Pip some advice. Jon notices Pip isn't the only one observing him when he spots Tyrion looking on approvingly. Tyrion shifts his attention away from Jon to Jeor Mormont and Maester Aemon. They ask him how many winters he's seen, Tyrion answers 9, and though the winter of his birth was 3 years long, Aemon says this current summer has lasted 9. With a long summer comes a long winter, and if what the wildlings captured, fleeing south, say is to be believed, this winter will come with the White Walkers. Tyrion brushes it off, saying the fishermen of Lannisport also claim they see mermaids, but Mormont mentions a ranger who swore he saw the White Walkers right up until Ned Stark lopped his head off. Hey Will, they're talking about you! I'm pretty sure this is the last time will ever be mentioned again. At no point in the show has his name ever been said, so I guess he never told anyone his name, not even Mormont. With Aemon pointing out how woefully undermanned and under-resourced the Night's Watch is, Mormont urges Tyrion to ask his sister the Queen for help, as she might be able to convince the King to send aid. Yeah, good luck with that, Tyrion. We cut to a short scene of Drogo and Dani laying naked together as she tells him that she knows she is going to have a boy before they lovingly kiss. Dani is well and truly in the capital of Sweden. Back at the wall, Tyrion fulfills his dream of urinating off the top of it, then Jon asks him if he'll pass through Winterfell, and if so, can he tell Bran that he misses him? Tyrion says of course, then tries to cheer Jon up, saying it's better to be a rich cripple than just a cripple, before saying farewell. Down in King's Landing, Arya meets her new dancing master, Syrio Forel, first sword to the Sea Lord of Braavos. He throws her a training sword which she fails to catch, to which Syrio says tomorrow she will, then proceeds to critique her grip when she holds the sword with 2 hands. Arya complains the sword is too heavy to hold one-handed, and Syrio points out it's because she has little noodle arms, but they will get stronger as she trains. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. She also asks what if she drops it, but Syrio argues you can't drop part of your arm, as that is what the steel will become. He makes her turn side phase and says her being skinny is good, as she'll be harder to hit. In the book he also mentions her being left-handed is also an advantage, as it will throw off her opponents. All the while this is happening, he's been referring to Arya as a boy. When she points out she's a girl, he says it doesn't matter, because actually Arya's a sword. Damn Syrio, make your mind up. Arya seems to impress Syrio when she says she's holding a needle, not a battle axe, when he critiques her grip again. He explains how the water dance is different to the knight's dance, it being swift and sudden rather than hacking and hammering, that men are just ugly giant bags of mostly water, and when the water leaks out, they die. I don't claim to know anything about sword stances, but Sirio takes a stance that reminds me of what I've seen in fencing. Logically, this would complement Arya's use of needle with it being a stabby sword rather than a slashy one. This shows Ned took special care in picking the right teacher for Arya after seeing her with needle in her room. Speaking of Ned, he enters as Sirio and Arya begin their training proper, with Sirio throwing Arya her sword and her catching it, which I guess now means it's tomorrow. Initially he's amused, but slowly the sound of the wooden swords clacking morphs into steel swords clashing, and the sounds of battle fills Ned's mind as his smile disappears to end the episode. So, that was the third episode of the first season of Game of Thrones titled Lord Snow, and what a jumpy episode it was. From the first frame of the episode, starting after the title sequence, we're in King's Landing for about 14 minutes, according to my premiere timeline. We then switch to Winterfell for around 3 minutes before cutting back to King's Landing for 2 minutes and 52 seconds. We head to the Wall for 1 minute and 36 seconds, then back to King's Landing for 1 minute and 23 seconds, then back to the Wall for 2 minutes before remaining King's Landing for around 8 long blessed minutes. We have several long scenes before towards the end of the episode where we're at the Wall for 2 minutes and 3 seconds, then 1 minute and 2 seconds, with the 48-second scene of Dany and Drogo sandwiched between the two. Show's spinning my head round so fast it's got me looking like this. In conclusion, I'd put this episode at the rank of good, with my favourite part going to how the big three of the episode, Ned, Dany and Jon, are trying to get used to the new positions that they found themselves in, and my most disliked going to the delivery of the back alley Sally line. Sorry, Michelle. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any advice on what I could do better for the next video, please leave it in a comment below. Next time, we will be covering the 4th episode of the first season of Game of Thrones titled Cripples, Bastards and Broken Things, so don't forget to like, subscribe and comment, even if it's just to say burn them all. Thank you again for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Goodbye.